Hi, this afternoon, our Byte Size Learning is a book release, and we're with our friend John Samuel, who is one of the co-founders of Abler, a company here in Raleigh, and their focus is making technology accessible, which is really fascinating. However, his book is nothing about that. His book is about his journey and kind of life in having a disability and where he's gone since then and the adventures he's had. And the title of the book, we really need to talk about this. This is great. The title is Don't Ask a Blind Guy for Directions, a 30,000-mile journey for love, confidence, and a sense of belonging. Okay, why did you decide to title your book that?
Oh my gosh, Eileen, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm just so excited to be participating, and thank you for highlighting the book. But the title of the book, it was a long and tedious process. I did not realize how much goes into, writing a title of a book when I first started this whole process. And they think about search engine optimization. You have to think about like short, catchy words and kind of things that tie into your life. And so when I was thinking about this, I knew I wanted to talk about the distance, the sheer distance, kind of like the 30,000 miles. That piece I had an idea of. I wanted to talk about what I was looking for, this journey I went on, and love, confidence, and sense of belonging was always something that's kind of the core concepts of my life. And so when it came to Don't Ask the Blind Guy for Direction, I was like, going through this kind of directional components, and then all of a sudden just blurted it out. I was like, don't ask the blind guy for directions. And it kind of stuck, and it kind of goes in two ways. One, being a blind CEO or leader, people often don't think about people with disabilities in leadership roles. So don't ask the blind guy for direction. And then also there is a twist in my book, which about, and how I ended up going around the world just to find everything I was looking for right here in the triangle. And so kind of ties into that, saying, don't ask the blind guy for directions, because I'll take you 30,000 miles around the world to find your way across the street.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about Abler and how you began that organization, that company.
Yeah, so Abler is actually this organization that really started 5 years ago, 3 years before the actual formation of Abler. And that was when I joined an organization called LCI, or at that time it was called LC Industries. And LC Industries happened to be the largest employer of people who are blind in the country, and was located in Durham, North Carolina. And their primary business was manufacturing. They made over 2,500 products, making everything from file folders to mattresses to tactical assault gear. And they wanted to start to create upward mobility for people who are blind. There's manufacturing is a noble profession, but it's not necessarily the profession everybody wants to go into. And so they wanted to create these new tech-based jobs, and that's why I joined the company to start this new business. And when I first got in there, I realized the challenges I faced in my own life. One was digital accessibility. I realized we needed to eliminate the digital divide if we wanted to help create these tech jobs. So we launched a digital accessibility business. The second part of our business was we had to change the mindsets of people and organizations. Because even when I was going through my own job search and interviewing with companies and people, I think people just didn't realize, they had these misconceptions of what people with disabilities were able to do. And so I struggled finding jobs often. And I realized that if we want to set people up for success, we're going to have to change the mindset of those organizations. And then finally, I realized that another component of this, we had to create pathways for employment. We had to get people trained up. It's not one thing just to say you have the best of intentions of hiring people, and you may have all your systems and processes in place, but if the talent isn't prepared, they're not going to be set up for success. And so we wanted to create a workforce development program, which I'm super excited about. And that's what we launched. So we have these 3 lines of business: digital accessibility, disability inclusion training, and our workforce development program. And that's what our core business is. And a couple of years ago, I met my colleague, Mike Iannelli, who is my co-founder, and we joined forces and we launched Abler. And it's been a wild ride since.
Well, that's fabulous. That's great. So why did you decide to share your story at this point in your life? Because you're still, your company's only 5 years old,
Yeah.
although it's been a journey
Yep.
for quite a few years. Um, you know, this seems to be like just the first leg of your journey, maybe?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it is, it really, the reason the timing of this was I started the book maybe 3 years ago. Yeah, right when we were really launching Abler, going from LCI Tech to Abler. And I thought this was a good turning point in my life because I felt like we were going somewhere with Abler. And, that was 2 years ago, and we've made a lot of progress since then. But I think the reason for the timing came that I had really, in my own personal life, I started to feel like I have really come out of the closet a blind person. I am now embrace my disability to the fullest. And it is, I am in such a better place where I am today. And it took me a long time to get there. And I wanted to share my own experiences with people who may be going through some challenge in life. And I wanted them to have that exposure. And then also, I realized that something I talk a lot about is proximity builds empathy. And the more I could share my story, and it can help change the mindsets of people and organizations. So, and again, I was doing a lot of virtual conversations like this, but I know people consume and take in information in different ways. So I take part in lots of different podcasts. I go and do, physical speeches. And I thought, a book would also be another way of sharing that story and helping organizations and people in those organizations really understand the challenges of what people who are with disabilities are going through, and so that they can help kind of bridge those gaps in their own organizations.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Um, I love some of your other projects you're doing. My favorite, I think, would be Drip My Cane. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm trying not to give away all the secrets and all the information from the book, so people will have a chance to
No,
read it and, discover your life.
no, for sure. Drip My Cane is just something that I love so much. I don't know if you remember an old TV show called Pimp My Ride.
Yes, I
Well,
do.
Pimp My Ride and on MTV was the show where people, this rapper named Exhibit would go to somebody's house, take their car keys to their old beat up cars, and then come back, have them pimped out, and and change their lives. And I thought I could do the same thing with my cane. And so in 2020, 2019 and 20, before the pandemic, when I went to networking events, I realized that my cane became this barrier for people to talk to me. I thought the moment I had a cane, people would be like, "Oh, he can't see. I'm going to come talk to him." But I had this complete opposite effect. And so, I wanted to create this cane, break down that barrier of the cane, and make it something that people talked about. And what better than art to do that? And so I wanted to start reaching out to different artists and trying to see, hey, can we put some art on my cane? Because to me, it was like this blank white canvas. Let's utilize this space. And so we launched a design competition in 2020. And we had designers from all over the world submit designs. And typically wherever I go, I have a pair of sunglasses. And the first year design cane, the winner cane, used the sunglasses, and they decked it out in fluorescent colors. And the designer was in England. And last year, we partnered with the organization E1, which is the timepiece, the watch I'm wearing right now. They partnered with us, and the winner came from Brazil. And this year, we're super excited. We'll be announcing it. It already now be announced that we are going to be highlighting 4 different companies who are really working to break down barriers for people with disabilities. So Lazadio, which is a wayfinding application to help people who are blind navigate the world. We have Disclo, which is an organization that helps people and organizations help with the disclosure aspects within the companies. And then we also have, we're highlighting 321 Coffee, which is a top-rated coffee shop here in Raleigh that employs people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then finally, we're going to be highlighting E1, the timepiece company. And so we're going to have people voting for these canes. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh, that's really exciting. What a fun project, and what a positive spin on something that, you found to be isolating.
Yeah.
that instead of people feeling more comfortable and realizing that you had vision loss and, probably couldn't notice if they were waving across the room to
Yeah.
you. This was, should have been a sign, and, some people were able to come up and talk to you and approach you. So it's October. I'm not sure when anybody's watching this webinar, but in our world today, it's October, which is disability. It's a big month for us. It's Disability Awareness Month, but it's also Disability Employment Month.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how organizations or companies could reach out to the disability community as they're hiring? What can they do to make people in the disability community aware of job opportunities?
Yeah, there's several things that organizations do. First thing, you have to be intentional. You can't just say, oh, we want to hire people with disabilities. You really need to be intentional about it. And that means going to where people are with disabilities. So there's organizations like Chronic Capable. There's, disability student services at different colleges. I mean, pretty much every college will have a disability student services. And I think it's reaching out to them and saying, look, we want to highlight these opportunities that we're hiring for, and making sure that people know about those roles. And then the other piece is we have to make sure that the online applications are accessible. And it's not just taking the word of someone saying, oh yeah, it's accessible. Actually ask people with disabilities, can you please go through and tell us what that experience is like? And really make sure that the whole process is accessible. And then finally, when it comes to interviews, make sure that interviewers understand disability etiquette, how to engage with people with disabilities, how to make sure you have the right accommodations, and really kind of focus on the capabilities of the individual and they're in the fit for the job. And those are some big things. And not to mention, one of the big things, again, we talk about is job applications. Does the job really need a driver's license? Do you really need to be able to lift 50 pounds? Really need to relook at the kind of the language in a job description to really see if it really is required for that actual opportunity. Because in some ways you may be unintentionally, excluding a group of people who can do the job, and you're just using some boilerplate like content. But it goes back to being intentional.
That's true. And it's also posting on your listing. When you post, putting right in the listing, we welcome applications from, people with disabilities, people from various backgrounds.
Yeah.
We encourage women to apply for this job, especially in the field of technology, because it can be so heavily male-centered sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
But just letting people know that, we want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. You are welcome in our world.
Exactly. And I think that's also goes back to even on social media and on your website, share the stories and experience of those individuals who are already there. And if you don't have people there, reach out to people and have them share their experiences. Like, that's kind of thing. People want to see themselves within that organization. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have some people who really feel that they feel like they have a sense of belonging in their organization, have them share that experience, because that's what people want to hear. And so, yeah.
Yeah, because nothing says more that you're welcome here than having someone who's already there talk about, I love my job. I love working here. These are the great things. We have this wonderful accessible office.
Exactly.
You can actually get, you can get in the door.
Right? You can
in more than one way.
Exactly.
So as someone who went through a major life change at a young age, what would your advice be to someone who, whatever the life change could be, it could be, we've just gone through a pandemic, so it could be economic, it could be, disability related, or a range of things. I think a lot of us have gone through life altering experiences, whether we wanted to or not, in the last couple of years. What would your advice be as they're going through this?
I think it's easy to kind of get caught up and kind of just sit down and be like, okay, I'm struggling through this. And, and that's kind of where I was when I was going through my hardest point in my life. I had just lost my job. My wife and I just had a baby. We just had built a house and we were running out of money. And I just sat down. I was like, oh my gosh, like I just started to kind of feel bad for myself. It's like everything's happening to me. And there was a couple of things that kind of changed my life. One, I heard this podcast called Guy Raz, How I Built This, and he had this restaurateur named Jose Andres, and Jose Andres was talking about. He made this comment about like luck can't find you unless you keep moving, and I realized like I've got to keep moving. Whatever it is, I have to keep moving. That meant me going out of the house. That meant me looking for jobs. That meant me just always moving. And one of the things I started doing was I was like, I feel like I don't have control of anything. But the one thing I can do is I can do push-ups. So I forced myself to do push-ups every morning. And at that moment, when I was able to do the 100 push-ups, I felt this sense of accomplishment and control in my life that I had felt like I lost. And that really kind of changed my mindset in many ways. So my advice would be keep moving and find those things to take control in your life, even if it is just doing some push-ups or washing dishes or making your bed. Take control of what you can, because there's so much we can't, but the things that we can control, let's do that.
Oh, that's really great. I mean, I think it's always important that you do take some time to kind of wallow in,
Yeah,
where your life is and what's going on. But then there's got to be a road out. And
that's correct. Yes.
Jose Andres is fabulous anyway, but I like that. How do you find luck? Keep moving.
Yeah, you can't find luck unless you keep moving. And it was so interesting because the idea of keep moving, that was actually was one of the thoughts of the title of my book. And I actually had cut that chapter out, like portion of that chapter out of my book, so it didn't make sense in the book. And so, but the idea of keep moving, and I was recently listening to a speech by Martin Luther King, and he talks about like, if you can't take a highway, then take the path. If you can't take the path, walk on the, walk. If you can't walk, you crawl, right? And it was like, but you just keep moving. And it was almost like, oh, wow. And again, I butchered what Martin Luther King said, but the last line was, you just keep moving. And I think that if we can kind of keep that in the back of our mind, and you're right, you do need to take time for yourself. You need to, take the time, take what you need, but always have that path. Remember, your end strategy is to get out of that. And the way to do that is to keep moving.
Oh, definitely. So, what's one thing you'd like readers to take away from your book after reading it? I'm sure there's definitely, knowing you, there's definitely humor in the book, and there's some great stories.
Yeah.
There's some very good stories. But what's one thing you'd want someone to take away?
So I would say two. One is like anybody who reads it is I want them to kind of, I hope that my story it can relate to anyone, but my journey may be unique, but the story is there. And I think my hope is that people take away that is not to give up on hope, right? And it's kind of a cliche thing, but again, hope is something that I held on so dearly throughout my journey. And even again, another title that I was going through was a love note to all my Uber drivers, because one thing I realized was that the people who really resonated with my story is like every day I get in an Uber, I'd share my story and I'd say thank you to them about, I can't do the work I do without you. And the Uber drivers would tell me like, hey, I was not feeling good about going out today. I didn't feel like, I'm just doing this temporarily, but there's a reason why I'm doing it. And they got this level of hope when they talked to me. And that's something that I hope people can take from it, that just don't give up and just have hope that things are going to, change. You have to do your own part, but there's hope. And then the other aspect of the book is for all the DEI folks out there, the diversity, equity, inclusion folks. I added in all of these fun facts, essentially, these accessibility or disability inclusion stats throughout it, because I want them to, I want the facts to tell them what's going on, and I want the story to show them, right? How do these facts actually kind of play into real world? And so when it comes to DEI folks, I want them to think about disability as a major part of their strategy, and accessibility needs to be included. And so for anyone else, I want them just to hold on to that hope and just, you know, um, to keep moving, essentially.
Well, but that is important. And you are a numbers guy.
Yeah.
So you had to include numbers in your book.
Yes.
But I think sometimes, or if people do see the numbers, they don't quite think of the impact or what that means in real life.
Exactly, right? So yeah, I mean, and you can manipulate stats however you want, but then you can see the stat, then you can see it into my story, right? You get the both pieces of that. This stat now shows you, whether it be, how many Asians who identify with a disability, they're the least number. But then you understand the reason why there's a low number of Asians who identify with a disability is that there's cultural aspects of it. And I share my own aspects of being an Indian American, and the fact my parents didn't want to disclose it. They were struggling from a cultural perspective. Now you understand that you may actually have Asians within your organization, people of Asian descent, who may not, they're going to be less likely identified because there's a cultural component to it. But would you tie that in when you see the numbers, right? You may not get that until you kind of put it into the context of the story.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I know a lot of people are on a DEI journey or a IDEA journey, or however they frame it, because there's been a lot of changes with it. And I think for some of them that I've talked to occasionally, people will tell me when I say, oh, well, you have to remember accessibility when you talk about inclusion. And I've been told, oh, no, we're good. We did that.
We did that. Yeah.
And I thought, accessibility, inclusion, diversity, equity, that's not a check mark.
Yep.
And, we like to remind people all the time, it's like, no, it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
What are changes you've seen either in technology, I would say, from when you first began to lose your sight to today?
I mean, the technology has been the change. I always talk to just like this inverted kind of this, like the way when my vision was going down, technology was increasing at the same rate, so that it didn't really impact me in ways that it could have if I was born 10 years earlier, right? If I was born 10 years earlier, there may have been that struggle. But the way that my vision loss was happening and the way technology was increasing, I still struggled, but there was at least hope there that the technology is catching up. And we're seeing AI, people talk about AI, there's ways that AI can augment what humans do. And I think that can be there's a good way we can leverage AI technology. But one thing that I'm starting to see that gets me really excited is that when it comes to digital accessibility, companies, when I first started this like 5 years ago, like the LCI Tech Abler, their focus was on the external websites. And it goes back to what you were saying, Eileen. It was just checking off a box. We need to make sure that our website is accessible because we can get sued. But now we're seeing organizations saying, no, we want to look at the entire employee journey mapping or customer journey mapping of every touch point that they touch with technology throughout our entire organization, or in that shopping experience, or whatever the experience is with that organization. And that's really, now you're really thinking about belonging. You're making people feel like they belong because you want to make sure that they're removing the barriers, all the different touch points. So take it from an employment standpoint, from that online application to that interview, to the onboarding. The number of people who I've talked to who have never been able to sign their own offer letter, right? We got to change that. But they're now starting to look at that using technology to say, how can we remove that barrier? And making sure we're having accessible technology. And then to the products, and then, that's where it's going. It's like, once you start to change all these processes, it'll lead into the new product development, because you're gonna have more people with disabilities at the table. And I think that's really goes back to having more people around the table with different experiences that you can really create more inclusive products. So I think we're on the right track.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Okay, there's one thing we haven't touched on in your book, in the title. What about love? I know you and I have had conversation about the fact that quite often when someone looks at a person with a disability or perceives them, the thought of someone with a disability dating doesn't seem to be in the playing field. There
Yeah.
seems to be like, oh, or it's a Hallmark movie or something like that.
Yeah.
And, it's not portrayed at the best.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that in your life.
No, I'm glad you kind of point this out, because dating was something, growing up and, as like any other kid, I wanted to go out with girls. I wanted to date people. That's what I wanted. I wanted, just like everyone else wanted. I wanted love. And I struggled with it, because once I started to I found out about my vision loss, or even before, like, kind of figure out, like I was struggling to drive. We live in this culture where, this kind of misconception, and then back then, at least I think things are changing, but in the 90s, it was like, oh, the guy's going to come pick up and drive and do all this stuff. And I struggled driving. And so, if I can't go pick you up, or I can't do this, I felt like, oh, that's this inadequacy. And then I realized that, and I didn't feel comfortable once I was diagnosed talking about my vision loss. I felt bad about, like, it was easier for me to tell someone that I had a drinking problem. So I hid behind alcohol rather than actually telling people that I had a disability, because I felt so much more ashamed of having a disability, and I didn't love myself. And, it impacted lots of my relationships, because when you start to hide behind something, or you're not being truthful from the very beginning of your relationship, that's not a foundation for any relationship. That's not going to be success. And so it really took me getting to grad school, when I was now openly talking about my vision loss with my personal life, and I was able to talk about it, and I was now starting to really kind of accept myself for the very first time. And once I was able to do that, I was able to open my heart, and I met my wife at the program, and it's been amazing. So, that's another piece of that. It's like, it's something I always wanted, but again, my disability, get in the way. And that was the moment I was able to accept myself. It really changed everything.
That's awesome, because that is such a intimate part of your life.
Yeah.
Where, to have to share that information and, share a very deep part of your life on the first date. So, or before the first date, or getting to know somebody. And, people aren't always that comfortable going that far, giving that much information about their life.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, my wife and I, before we even went on our first date, we laid everything on the table, because we were like, is this worth going down? Because we were friends. And it's like, she knew me as someone losing my sight and someone who's going blind, right? And like, that's a heavy thing to really talk about. But if we really wanted to have a successful relationship, this was something we had to talk about, because I didn't want her to be, I wanted us to go in there as a partner. That's what relationships are. And I know that's tough for a lot of people. But once I realized that I felt comfortable talking with her about it, that was the thing. I felt so comfortable talking to her about this, and it was the first time in my life I was able to do that. And that's when I knew I had a good partner.
well, definitely. Wow, that's amazing. So, well, our time is up, and I just want to say I really enjoyed getting to know you since I've been in Raleigh, and getting to know your story. And your book is now available for pre-order in Amazon.
Yes.
Here's the little sales pitch, but it is available for pre-order, and it comes out November 1st.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Eileen. It's been a pleasure getting to know you as well. And I look forward to many more, time together, you and I. And I think together we're really going to make some really great strides here in the Raleigh Triangle area. And I know our community is really lucky to have you here.
Oh, well, thank you. All right. So this is Eileen Bagnall, Executive Director of Arts Access, and I am signing off with my good friend and colleague, John Samuel from Abler. Have a great day.